Buy, sell or rent your property with Century 21 and you could win a brand new 2-bedroom apartment on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia. Visit c21prize.co.nz for your chance to win.
Welcome back to Your Property Empire. Well, joining me on the show tonight is John Mansamelli from Hunterwood Solutions, and we've just been joined by Charles Tarbey, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Well, tonight we're talking about different ways to improve the cash flow on your properties. And apparently you can own a property in different ways and that can make a difference. Tell us more, John.
Absolutely. One of the most common questions I have, Chris, is as a mortgage broker is, how can I do this in a way that maximises cash flow? And one of the great things I love is talk to your accountant about it is what's called tenants in common. Most couples, as you know, they will buy a property 50-50, but if a client has substantially higher income than their partner, then the idea is to transfer, or not transfer, but have a percentage of the ownership with the higher income earner.
And again, so it's always complicated. I always get confused on this, so we're going to pull up a graphic and you can take us through it.
Go through that. So tenants in common is a fancy way of just saying, hey, look, I want to be flexible with my ownership structure, so you can put 99% in the name of the person earning the most income. What you'll need to know as well is in the event of death, you need to get a will because the surviving partner does not automatically get it. Whereas joint tenants on the right-hand side is 50-50, that's equal ownership, and in the event of death, it passes on to the partner. But what I do love this about tenants in common is it allows the ownership to be skewed to the person paying the most tax, and therefore your cash flow will be substantially higher. But speak to your accountant and your financial plan.
It's a complicated area, and it's not something that people understand.
How many people go to sign a contract and then they suddenly got no idea?
No, they don't. And you've really got to consider that, because if you want to will a property to somebody, or if you're the only person sitting there, and or you're in a marriage and your partner dies, and then you want to do something with it and you will, it becomes a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
If it's not set up according to it. But look, most contracts are written a certain way. Most of the conveyancers will write it in one platform, and it very rarely changes from there. That's
but I
really
guess for a lot of people at auction, do you get many people that go and just sign their names on there and then they go and get the advice from their accounnt on the Monday after the auction and then say, Mr. Agent, oh, can I change it?
It probably looks like that, but most people would have gotten advice prior to an auction. If they're sensible about it, and that's why they get a contract, most cases, they're going to go and get their conveyancer to look at it well before that, just like you would, Chris.
Get your advice before.
Well,
beforehand. Exactly.
I always think the joint tenants was something else too, but I grew up in an area that...
We better move on before we get the rest of the end of Charles's joke.
Before Charles it.
So the fourth cash flow way to increase your cash flow.
Yeah, this is one that is little known. It's the building depreciation allowance. So for a lot of viewers, they may not be aware that after October 1987 that you can depreciate the building itself. So if you were looking at a situation where you're buying a relatively new property, talk to your accountant about getting 2.5% depreciation on roughly half of the purchase price. And what it actually means, Chris, is on a $500,000 property, you're looking at an extra $6,000 a year. And the government does this because what they're trying to do is say, let's add some more housing to the supply and also stimulate the economy. And so what it actually is depreciation on the outside of the building. It's the actual physical bricks and mortar of it. So speak to your accountant about it, but it's a wonderful way to claim some depreciation on stuff that you may not even claim.
Charles, you're a property investor. You must have it on all of yours.
I'm not allowed to talk about any of this.
No one's licensed for it.
I'm not licensed to talk about it.
But it's probably a good idea to speak to someone about it if you're an investor.
Oh, absolutely. There are many, many ways that people miss out on. Often we talk about, Brad Beer is a good mate of mine, and Brad is always shocked at the number of people that think, oh, my property's too old to have any depreciation, and so they just let it go. And the number of properties you have in this country that do not get depreciation reports done on them is incredibly significant.
It's only $500 or something.
I know, and the returns are exceptional.
Yeah.
The returns in most cases are exceptional.
Because quite often they guarantee that if you can't get more than whatever you paid back in tax for the cost of the report, then they won't pay for the report. So an absolute no-brainer. Certainly a good way to increase your cash flow. So look, I know we've flown through these four things very, very quickly. Again, if you want to get a copy of John's Cash Flow Secrets ebook, just SMS your first name, space, and then your email to 0427 016 235. It's automatic and it will just bounce something back to you straight away.
I wonder what they're going to do with that mobile number, some people. You can well imagine. I know what I'm going to do with it.
So it's not actually a real number, but it's called a computer. It's technology, Charles, these days.
Okay, sorry.
Let's run through your numbers. Clearance rates.
Ready to go. Oh, okay. Well, actually pretty good again. The clearance rates right across the nation were 77.9%, which is pretty strong. Last year was 70.7%. So there it goes, gives you an indication of what it's like. I think that the marketplace is really concerning in some instances because the Sydney marketplace hit 85.1%. Now, as you know, we talk about the fact that the eastern suburbs, Lower North Shore and the inner west are driving most of it. They're driving most of it. And because of that, if you take away some of the other regions that don't drive auction so strongly, those clearance rates realistically are probably 95% in those areas. So it's almost like back in boom condition.
Because how far does the clearance rate actually get up to? I mean, that's almost peaking, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a nice, peaking. And my mind's somewhere else at the moment.
It normally is, Charles.
Yeah. The other thing is that the Melbourne clearance rates was 78%, so even as an average, that's really strong. Adelaide came in at 76.5% and Canberra at 78.2%. Who knows what's going on? Even Brisbane hit over 55% in clearance rates this week.
Now, in Tom's little segment, he was talking about, look, maybe take your offer because there could be a lot more properties coming on the market.
Yeah, and I do understand what he's saying, and I really hope that that's the case, and you and I have hoped that for ages. Last week we only had a modest increase of 0.26% over the week before. This week we've had a 1.64% increase. That's not significant when you consider the amount of transactions that are going on out there. So I still think there's an undersupply. New Zealand had a smash through again. They were going up and they levelled out. And then they had a 6% increase this week over last week. So in all of their areas, in all of their capital cities, so they're doing exceptionally well. I think we need a lot more stock. I hope Tom's right from where he's seeing it out in the field with auctioneers. At this point in time, the numbers aren't saying that, but I really do hope that's the case. And if that's the case, yeah, it's going to be a lot better to sit back and make offers. Not easy to do right now in some of those top areas, Chris.
Now we're going to jump over the rent price movements and move on to the vacancy rates.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a worrying part here again with the vacancy rates. Sydney again had a great week at 2.28%. So that's great. Vacancy, it was 1.57 last week, so 2.28, I'm not concerned about it in any way. Melbourne was 3.12%, slight climb, but the big one is Perth. Last week was 8.83%. This week it's 9.9% vacancy. Now, if you add the three together, it's 5.12%. Lower than last week on an average, but Perth is really the one we have to keep watching. A few weeks back it was starting to nudge backwards and come down, but it's just gone back up again. That's impacting on landlords, of course, no doubt, with their mortgages and also real estate agents who live off their rent rolls. If they've got 10% of their properties vacant, there's a lot of income they're not getting.
Charles Tarbey from Century 21, thanks for joining us with all the figures. John, good to see you back on the show again, and we'll definitely have you get back again. Thanks for joining us this evening. Until next week, I'm Chris Gray. Good night.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.